All right, guys. So for many years after I bred pac-man frogs for the first time, everybody has asked me, how do you build a rain chamber for pac-man frogs that's really going to work well? So I'm actually rebuilding mine today. So I'm going to take you down the path of all the products and the supplies that you're going to need to build one for yourself. Starting with the PVC pipe. We're going to be using a 3/4 inch PVC pipe. They're cut to 2 foot lengths. You're going to need about 5 of those. And that's what's actually going to build your spray bar that's going to actually simulate the rain for you. Then we're going to go over to the 2 inch PVC. We're going to actually use those. We're going to cut them pretty short, about the height of the pump. And those are going to be the legs that actually hold up the floor for the Pac-Man frogs to be standing on and whatnot, so they're not in like really deep water. For that, we're actually going to use a piece of plastic that is used to cover lights and drop ceilings. And that stuff works really well. You can cut it to the size that you need really easily. That's what we've always used. And then we're going to use a decent sized pump. This was just the pump that I had over on the softshell turtles pond, but we're going to use it for this in this example. You're also going to need your 3/8 hose for it to make sure you can connect it to it. And for the actual spray bar, we're going to use 3 normal elbows. And then we got this elbow here that has threading on it in the corner. So it's still going to be a corner. So we can actually put this on here, connect it to there. So that's how we're actually going to get the water into the spray bar. And then with the T's, we're going to put that in the middle of the square so we have a spray bar going right down the middle of the cage. You're going to need zip ties. We're going to use that to get the spray bar to actually, we're going to put the spray bar on here and zip tie it to this. We're going to cut out these squares here so there's still structure to it, but we're going to be able to get in there with the lid on, and that's what's going to support the spray bar. We're going to use a 66 quart tote. This is just one we picked up at Home Depot. It's a pretty hefty one. We are going to have water in there, so you definitely want to make sure you have a good size one. You're going to need a drill, some drill bits, tape, a Sharpie, tape measure, a pipe, PVC cutters. All right, so how we're going to actually build the spray bar now is we're going to put it up against this, and I'm kind of guesstimating here a little bit, but we're going to measure it up to the inside of the tote lid because we want it to fit perfectly square inside of this to hold it and support it. Now that I got this one guesstimated on where we want it, we don't want it to go all the way over because we still got to fit the elbow on this. And even then, I might have to end up trimming this a little bit more once we get the elbows on there. But since I already got that kind of guesstimated where I want it, we're going to just, cheat a little bit here and make a little dash with it. And we'll go ahead and cut her. And you're going to use your PVC cutter for this. It just cuts right through it like butter. And then you're done. All right, so now that we got the outer perimeter of the spray bar done, and you got to do some finagling with it. As you can see, I had to make multiple cuts to make sure it fit right, because the whole point is the lid goes on the tote, and that's what holds this up. So we got to make sure that this actually fits in the perimeter of the actual tote here when this goes on. So now that I got that, now we're going to actually put in the middle spray bar, which we're going to put right there. I like to go ahead and get this put together on the outer perimeter first. That way I just have to hack that off real quick, trim it up just a little bit. I'm going to have to bring it in just a little bit, probably get rid of that much, maybe a ½ inch. So then I'm going to slap that right in, and then we got that thing all put together. All right, so after a few bits of finagling and doing way too many cuts, because there's really no exact measurements to do this, you just got to play with it. You got to make sure you find where you need your stuff to go, how you want it to go, and then you just keep cutting until you have it. And now we got this. So next step we're going to do is we're going to mark out the holes so it can simulate the rain. All right, so the main reason I'm using the tape is just so it's going to be a little bit easier for you guys to see. At least that's what I'm hoping. what you're going to do is I put a mark every inch. And as you can tell, I staggered them. So what's going to happen when you drill these are actually going to spray out at an angle like this, where this is going to shoot more straight down. Now remember, we are building this upside down. So you got to make sure that your threaded part here is facing the side that you're drilling. Otherwise, you're going to have to play some wacky Tetris to try to save what you got. All right, so now that we got this all mapped out on where we want all of our holes, we did a pretty simple pattern. You can play with it, do whatever one you want to do. But you're going to use a 7/64 bit, so it's going to be kind of a small one. And we're going to try this out first once we get everything put together, see if the pressure is right, and if we have to go to a bigger size, then we will, but this should be just fine. You want to try to be as straight as you can with these. And then when you do the other ones right here, you want to make sure that you angle your drill bit because, well, angle of the hole is how it's going to come out as a spray bar. And we want to have these actually staggered, shooting all over the place. Because we got to simulate the rainy season of South America. And you just go through. It's a tedious part, but it's got to be done. All right, now that we went through the tedious process of drilling the holes, now we did add a couple on there that we didn't have marked up just because it looked like it might be a dead zone. So now we're just going to go take this all off. All right, now some of them will have some little wisps like this. It's still in them where you need to try to get that out. You just go through and just make sure you get it cleaned up and whatnot. Sometimes you have to actually take apart the thing just so you can get some of the debris that's on the inside of the pipe. Because, I mean, this is what came off of it, drilling those holes. So it could easily clog one of your holes. So it's a good idea to take like a wire brush or something if you have a small enough one and go up and down in the inside of all your pipes to make sure you clean it off good. All right, so now that we got the spray bar all put together and drilled up real nice, now we got to set it on the top of the lid to see where we can cut out. So what I'll do is I'll try to square this up the best that I can. I'll put a little dot in the corners here to make sure that I stay around that portion. And I'll take the middle because it has this nice little brace here. I'm just going to cut along that and then meet into the corners of what I marked out. All right, after you are now happy with the holes that you have now, these holes are going to allow you to get access to the animals and to allow air to breathe throughout it. So once you have that where you want it, you're going to want to lay this down on here and see how everything fits. Now, I already went around and I put little dots right here, here. There's 2 over here on the end, and so on and so forth around it. So I know where I'm going to drill a bigger hole so we can fit a zip tie through it. Now, it doesn't really matter what size hole you do for this. Just make sure it's big enough for your zip tie to go through. And then you're just going to go through and you're going to go through and just cut all the holes out. All right, so now that you got your holes drilled, you're just going to feed this underneath, and we're just going to zip tie her right on. And then I'm going to jump to the other side so I can try to maintain it to be somewhat symmetrical and staying with each other. All right, so now that you got it attached to your lid, should be able to tip it upside down. It holds everything. It's nice and sturdy, so you're not having to worry about that going flimsy on you. But next we're going to put the hose fitting on, and that's what we're going to put right here. Which these, you don't need to over tighten. They just screw right in. You barely have to do hand tight. Because we're not going to be putting a ton of pressure through here, so, and plus the water has places to go, so it's not going to come out that union there. So now is the big test. Does it fit while it's on the tote? And there you go. That's how it should be. You can see it from underneath, how it's going to be covering the whole surface of the water, allowing the pac-man to really feel rain. All right, so this part's going to be a little more on the trickier side. You now have to figure out the dimensions here to here at the height that you're going to have it. So you're going to take your pump, and you're going to have your pump right there. So you got to make sure that your water level is about that high off the ground. You want to make sure there's plenty of room for your pump to take in water so it can shoot it straight up. So now we're going to finagle with this, and we're going to play around. I'm going to set it on top here. I'm going to try to move it around to where I think it will work for me. And I'm going to start a little on the big side. So I'm just going to make a dash right there, so I know that that's where I want to cut. And over on this side, I'm going to do the same thing. And I'm going to go bigger than what I need to, just so I can cut it down and get it to that perfect size without wasting any material. All right, so we're going to use these little pliers here, the cutters, and we're just going to go right to the corner and just it snips so easily, so quick. It's kind of a tedious thing, but it works well. It helps you stay accurate with it. And you just go through and get it all trimmed up. Now we are trimming a little bit bigger than what I think we're going to need, just to make sure that we can trim it down to what we need it to be and without wasting any material. And we're going to be using that 2-inch PVC pipe here in a second to actually make pillars essentially for this to stand on. And that's what's going to help us keep the depth of the water for the frogs shallower than what the actual whole body of water is. All right, so I have a zip tie here just to help me put it in and out of the tote so I can get the right size for it. Now, as you see, I did cut out some of these corners because the tote is a little rounded there, and by cutting that out allows it to fit better. So we go ahead and we put it right in. Fits nice and snug. You want to make sure there's no way that your frogs are going to be able to get underneath it or anything like that. So you want it to be relatively on the tighter side. So next thing we're going to do is just go ahead and pull this out, and we're going to see how deep it needs to be for that pump. So right about there. So probably about 4.5 inches is what we're going to end up doing. So we're going to take these guys here, and we are going to cut them into 4.5 increments, and then we're going to use those as pillars. We're going to drill holes here and on the other side here, and that's how we're going to be able to thread a zip tie through that to be fastened to the crate. All right, now that we got that in there, one thing you got to make sure you pay attention to is if you're looking right here, you got to figure out what corner your pump has to be into with your rain chamber spray bar. So mine's going to be sitting like this, so I got to make sure the pump is over in that corner. So the water line's going to run straight down to that. So now what we got to do, now that we got all these, we need to plan kind of where they need to go. I'm going to do corner ones, obviously, one dead center, and then probably one off to the side for that side support there. But what I did is I cut these all to the right length, put holes right there so your zip ties can be easily fed through. And that's how it's going to be. Have a little zip tie right there. Or if you want to get fancy with it, you can do each individual hole. That'll work just fine. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to get all these legs on there. All right, now we got the feet on the crate stuff here. We've got it doubled up through all the holes that we put in those legs. We made sure that we had the pump where we wanted it to be and where we wanted the little submersible heater to go. So now all we have to do is connect these two things together and try it out. You want to make sure you cut that hose so it doesn't kink on you. Alright, so we got it all set up now. We got put a couple frogs in there so you can see them swim around in it, whatnot, so you can also judge the depth that we have it at. But let's see how it goes. We ended up having to go get a new pump because the pump we had just was not enough. It's 1,100 gallons per hour with the one that we ended up with. You're definitely going to want something like that, maybe even a little bit more powerful if you go with a larger rain chamber. But all right, so this is about what you want it to spray like.